It is official. Sean Diddy Combs has been sentenced in his federal criminal case. We're going to discuss everything that happened inside that courtroom, including the bombshell decision by the judge.
Diddy's fate has finally been sealed, and the way it all came crashing down is something people will be talking about for decades. The judge didn't sugarcoat it. The courtroom wasn't given some polished speech filled with leniency and soft words.
Today was the day. After 2 years from when Cassie Ventura Fine filed her lawsuit against Sean Combs, after an investigation, after a raid, after the Cassie tape was published by CNN, after an apology video, after an arrest, after multiple indictments, superseding indictments, after an 8-week trial over the summer, where Sean Diddy Combs was acquitted of racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking, but convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution, namely transporting people across state and international lines for sex work, he was sentenced for his crimes today. Judge Arun Subramanian in federal court in downtown Lower Manhattan sentenced the rap mogul. Just handed down the sentence a few minutes ago at the time of this recording. Now, to be clear, why this is such a big deal, other than the fact that Sean Combs has been sentenced for federal sex crimes, we had no idea what the actual sentence will be. There is no pro forma mandatory sentence here, like a life in prison. It's just a standard. We know what's going to happen. No, there was a range for this judge. The defense was asking for no more than 14 months in prison. And since Sean Combs had already served about 13 months in the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center, he essentially would be out in no time if that was the case. The prosecution was asking for 11 years. The probation department that did its own analysis recommended 7 years and 3 months. There was a range. We did not know what the sentence would be. We are going to get into everything that happened today, including what it was like in that courtroom when the sentence was handed down. And to do that, I want to bring back on Queen Elizabeth Milner, Long Crime Zone. She was inside that courtroom not only for today, for every day of this trial. This is the conclusion of quite a saga. Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on. First, I want to start off, how did Sean Combs look? Okay, that was a big question. I know we have courtroom sketches that came out. How did he look? How did he appear? What was his demeanor? We'll talk about the statement he made in court, but just how did he look?
Yeah, well, Jesse, you can imagine how big of today actually was for Sean Combs. I mean, he was going to be learning his fate. And to your point in your intro earlier, we didn't know where that range would really lie. Could it be on the tail end of that being time served and he could possibly leave walking out of the doors? We didn't know if that was going to happen. We didn't know if he was possibly going to get double-digit sentence. So I think the weight of the world you could kind of feel when he walked inside the courtroom today. He was wearing casual clothes, civilian clothes, so he wasn't in his MDC tan jumpsuit or anything like that, like he was at the last hearing that happened just last week. But today he appeared in a tan sweater, white undershirt, dark pants, similar to the looks that he was appearing in during trial. And then when he walked inside the courtroom today, Jesse, he waved at his family. He did kind of like a little prayer hand, but he did seem a little bit nervous. And I think it's possibly because they just didn't know where the sentencing would go. And so he sat at the defense table with his glasses, and then the proceedings began. But you can only imagine what was really going on in his mind as soon as he walked in, saw his family, saw the amount of people inside that courtroom, because Jesse, it was a packed house today, body to body, person to person. There was no seat left unseated today inside that courtroom.
Real quick, talk to me about that. I heard there was 30 people in the front rows that were friends and family of Sean Combs. Anybody notable?
So Jesse, today inside the courtroom, it really was a kind of a little bit of a who's who was in there. I mean, everyone from Janice Combs, Diddy's mother, Keisha Combs, Diddy's sister, Dallas Austin, who was a music producer. He was inside that courtroom today. Sean Combs' children, that being Jesse and Delilah Combs, the twins. It was Quincy Brown who was there. Justin Combs was there. Christian Combs was there. But I think what was interesting, Jesse, and a notable guest, at least to me, was alleged victim number 3, and that being Gina Hun.
No, the decision came down like a hammer, heavy, final, and merciless. After months of speculation, years of rumors, and endless questions about whether someone like Diddy would ever actually face the full weight of justice, the answer is now clear. He will. His freedom is gone. His empire has collapsed. His reputation is dust. And what's left is the harsh reality of a prison sentence that stripped away any illusion of power he thought he still had. When the judge announced the sentence, It wasn't just another moment in another trial. It was history being written in real time. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. For a man like Diddy, who built his entire life on commanding attention, on filling every room with his presence, on making sure eyes were always on him, this time, all eyes were on him for a very different reason. Witnesses say you could hear gasps, whispers, even some muffled cries from supporters in the back. Everyone expected something serious, but not like this. Not a sentence this brutal, this harsh, this absolute. And let's be real, people had their doubts leading up to this. There were endless debates online, in the media.
At all. And it was kind of a big shocker, to your point, Jesse, that she wasn't there, because we thought that she would be inside the courtroom, and we were kind of curious who the government witnesses who would be there to give their final victim impact statements ahead of the judge giving down Sean Combs' sentencing. But today, right off the bat, Christy Slavic, who is a prosecutor, a federal prosecutor, she said Mia no longer wishes to give an impact statement. She had submitted that written statement, and that the tone of the defense letter, I think, was what really kind of changed her mind as to coming into the courtroom today. And I can only imagine probably how Mia feels specifically. She's using a pseudonym even to testify, even as she's writing letters to the court, because of just the fear that she has been getting in terms of what she believes to be backlash, either from Sean Combs or his fans, or even just the attention that it's that the case has brought against her too. And so I was very surprised that she didn't attend court in person today, but I can understand why, because even the judge said to Mark Agnifilo today that the tone of the defense's letter in response to Mia giving a victim impact statement was just completely inappropriate. And it was a pretty harsh letter, Jesse. I'm sure that you've already read it, but it was kind of a very harsh tone, and it was kind of similar a little bit to her cross-examination too.
Now let's talk about the prosecution. So prosecutors today, they outlined their argument in court. It echoed a lot of what their filings were in anticipation of this sentencing. What were some of the key arguments, the themes that stood out today about why they say it was justified for Sean Combs to have a lengthy sentence? Remember, they were asking for 11 years. How did they justify it today? What were the arguments they made in court?
Well, today, Christy Slavic, making the arguments on behalf of the government, she said that today is about accountability and justice. And she was talking specifically about accountability, Jesse. She was talking about the conduct that was lasting for a 15-year period. I mean, even if you go back to the superseding indictments where it says this conduct went on from 2009 all the way to 2024, that's a long period of time. And so from the government's perspective, they really just wanted accountability from the defendant, that being Sean Combs. And then they also wanted justice, particularly for the victims. I know when we often talk about the Sean Combs case, the Diddy case, the P. Diddy case, he is the focus of this. But I think a lot of people have to remember that there were victims in this case, that being Cassie Ventura, that being Jane, that also kind of also applying to some of the charges that he was acquitted for too, where you can also bring in like Mia and Capricorn Clark and Deontay Nash. And so I think the government from their perspective was really trying to speak on behalf of all of those people. And so today, Christy Slavic, again, she was saying that the law requires the court to know all about the defendant and the defendant's conduct. This isn't just a case about freak-offs and hotel nights. It's about a man who did horrible things to people. He weaponized currency against victims. They were talking about that even though he was convicted just on the Mann Act charges, that it's also kind of in relation to the violence, and that the defendant didn't understand or doesn't understand how harsh his conduct was, and that his respect for the law was just something as simple as lip service. And so, yes, the government was asking for a far steeper penalty and punishment when it came to Sean Combs' sentencing. They were hoping for those double digits, and I think they were kind of opposed to the whole split the baby method, as Christy Slavic said today in court. And so they did want a harsher end of the sentencing today. And I think as far as the judge's concern and what his ultimate sentence would be, it kind of ended up being a kind of happy medium a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get into that. And the defense, number of defense attorneys spoke. I think almost all of them. You had Xavier Donaldson, you had Brian Steele. What were some of the themes they were focusing on in terms of why Sean Combs deserves a lenient sentence, why 14 months would be appropriate?
Yeah, so right off the bat, Jason
Media, even in the streets, would Diddy's money protect him? Would his fame shield him? Would his lawyers find some clever loophole, some technicality to shave down the punishment? That's how it always seemed to go for him. Every time things got messy in the past, every time scandals surfaced, somehow he managed to slip through the cracks. Somehow, the storm never hit him head on. But this time, The storm wasn't just passing through, it landed right on top of him, and the judge made sure everyone knew there would be no escape. The sentence itself, long, unforgiving, designed to make an example out of him, carried more weight than just years behind bars. It symbolized the collapse of an entire persona. For decades, Diddy embodied the idea that power, influence, and wealth could put you above accountability. He strutted through life like the rules didn't apply, like the game was always rigged in his favor. But the gavel came down, and in an instant, that illusion shattered. His reaction told the story better than any headline could.
Driscoll making the arguments on behalf of the defense, because Jesse, yes, it was Jason Driscoll who spoke, it was Nicole Westmoreland who spoke, Xavier Donaldson who spoke, Mark Agnifilo and Brian Steele. That's 5 of his, 9 defense attorneys who all spoke in court today. So as far as Jason Driscoll is concerned, he was saying that the defense says that Combs didn't make money off of the Mann Act convictions that he was charged. And that was kind of a big theme in terms of his argument today, and that the defense submitted 300 cases of Mann Act cases where it talked about pimps and minors being trafficked, immigrants being transported, homeless people being transported, all of that stuff. And so that was kind of the theme, at least from Jason Driscoll's point of view, and that the defense also saying that Miss Slavic, Christy Slavic, who is one of the federal prosecutors, blamed Mr. Combs for having a drug addiction for 25 years, something that they were also talking about, how he had been addicted to drugs going back at least to 2000. And so a lot of his conduct might be not necessarily excused because of his drug addiction, but they say that might be kind of the underlying reason. And then when you get to Nicole Westmoreland, she was talking about Sean Combs' inspiration and his commitment at MDC Brooklyn, where she was talking about all of his successful businesses. She was talking about how he started a record label from the ground up. She was talking about his clothing line. She was talking about his television company, that being Revolt, and that's where she started to really kind of get emotional, where she was saying that Sean Combs spent a majority of his adult life really trying to help the Black community, really trying to give back to the community, that he isn't this larger than life persona, he's just a man who makes mistakes. When it came to the other defense attorneys speaking, Brian Steele was just very urging of the judge to please consider that Sean Combs had untreated trauma throughout his life. Brian Steele urged the judge to consider that Sean Combs had untreated trauma in his life, and that there have been times in Sean Combs' life, especially when he had drugs in his system, that there were times where he had flatlined and that he was trying to be a better version of himself. And I feel like, Jesse, that was really the theme of all of what the defense was saying, and that these 13 months were really reflective of Sean Combs. He wants to be a better person. He wants to leave the past in the past and be a better person for the future. And so even when it came to Xavier Donaldson, he was speaking about how Sean Combs should receive a just punishment. He brings up intent when he talks about Sean Combs' conviction of the Mann Act charges, and that Sean Combs isn't just a pimp, and that he was talking about his work at MDC Brooklyn, where Xavier Donaldson said, we've had assemblymen and politicians, billionaires in MDC, but nobody besides Sean Combs was there to actually help out the other detainees and the other inmates there. And then finally with Mark Agnifilo, his whole argument was that domestic violence comes with childhood trauma. So I feel like the defense was really kind of trying to pull at the heartstrings a little bit of the judge, and even possibly the public too, because this was their final say to all of the people, all of the media coverage that this case has brought attention to. And so I think at the end of the day, from the defense's perspective, they wanted everyone, including the judge, to just look at Sean Combs as a man who made terrible, terrible mistakes, and whether or not he's been punished enough for it, that was kind of what the judge had to consider today.
By the way, I think it was interesting that I think the prosecution said in response that only one of the 5 defense lawyers who spoke actually mentioned the victims. It was very much Sean Combs focused. Now, I say that because Sean Combs did something very interesting when he spoke. He mentioned the victims. We'll get to that in a second. Before we do, I wasn't in that courtroom, but I will tell you, I reading about this, I could feel the emotion that came out when Sean Combs' children provided statements. That felt like a turning point. The judge...
Witnesses say his face changed the moment the words left the judge's mouth. Gone was the smugness. Gone was the stone mask he'd been wearing throughout the trial. What replaced it was fear. Real fear. The kind of fear that grips you when you realize there's no way out. No deal left to cut. No amount of money that can buy you another chance. For the first time, Diddy looked like a man who understood just how far he had fallen. And here's the thing, this wasn't just about Diddy, this was about the system, the culture, the country as a whole. The judge didn't just sentence one man. The judge sent a message, loud and clear: power doesn't mean immunity. Wealth doesn't mean you get to live above the rules. If anything, being in the spotlight made the fall that much harder, that much more devastating, that much more necessary in the eyes of the court. The shockwaves were instant. Headlines exploded across the globe. Social media went into overdrive. Some people cheered, calling it justice long overdue. They said the sentence proved that no one, no matter how rich, no matter how famous,
would later reference the children. Talk to us about who spoke, what they said, and what was it like in that courtroom?
Well, I think it's a moment that a lot of people were anxious to hear, not only from Sean Combs himself, but Sean Combs' children, who, I mean, we do have to admit, Jesse, they have been through a lot throughout the duration of Sean Combs' civil litigations, all the way going into his federal case, too. And so when the Combs children came up for the victim impact statements, they all came up together. They really were showing kind of a solidified, solid unit when they were up at that podium speaking in front of the judge. I will say the only exception of Sean Combs' 7 children was the fact that his 2-year-old daughter Love wasn't there inside the courtroom. So in terms of who was speaking, it was all of them, again, except baby Love. But Quincy spoke first. And so one thing people have to note about Quincy is that Sean Combs isn't his biological dad. Albie Shore actually is. And so, but what Quincy said when he first spoke to the judge, because he was the first one up, he is also the oldest child too, is that he is our father. In front of us, he's a changed man. Week after week, we see him evolve. Our father will never do anything to jeopardize his freedom ever again. Then Justin Combs spoke next. He's the second oldest son. Justin Combs said, please give our father a second chance. This has been the toughest time he's ever been through. This time saved my father's life. I talk to my father every day. He's changed for the better. I ask you to see my father the way I do. Christian Combs was next, and Christian Combs kind of also brought kind of the personality here a little bit too, Jesse, where he says, you know, I'm the one who people say I look the most like my pops. I studied my dad up and down. He's my superhero. He taught me to treat women with respect. So he said the past year I had to travel across the country to see him for 2 hours. He's changed. I see in his eyes as his twin that he's changed. Please give my family grace and please give him mercy. But really, Jesse, where the heartstrings were with the girls, and that was Jesse Combs, Chance Combs, and Delilah Combs, who were speaking today. Jesse Combs, who spoke first as far as the daughters go, she broke down immediately when she got up to that podium and started speaking. She said, we aren't here to excuse his mistakes. We need him in our life. I lost my mom, her mom being Kim Porter, when I was very young. He promised to be there to keep us safe. Then Chance Combs, she had spoke, and she said that we're just his daughters, but we do need our father. When we talk, he speaks with a clear mind. He's more patient. He's thoughtful. He wants to be a better man, a better father. He's parented our 2-year-old sister from jail, and I saw glimpses of our father. Our sister deserves a father who's present to teach her how to ride a bike, to tuck her in at night before she goes to sleep, something that any kid would want. And then the final child who spoke on behalf of the family was Delilah Combs, and she said that we're scared of the thought of not having our mom and our dad in our life. She says that these are the years that we'll never get back. I know that much of the missing years hurt because we have lost our mom. We already lost so much. Please, Your Honor, give our family the chance to heal together. Not as a headline, but we're trying to do better. And so I think from just like a human perspective, it was very emotional. I mean, you couldn't help but feel for the children, especially his daughters, because some of his children have lost both parents. But, you know, I was wondering, would their impact statement have any sway on the judge, who I believe that had already made up his mind going into sentencing? And so it was interesting just to hear just the emotional impact of what they've been through before Sean Combs was ultimately sentenced.
I think it did. I think it did have an impact on him. He mentioned something about the children later on. Again, we'll get to that. We're teasing it up because it was significant what the judge said. The judge would end up referencing not only Sean Combs, but the children and the victims too. We'll get to that. All of this was coupled by something I don't think I've seen in a sentencing. There was a video.
Can run forever. Others, though, were stunned, even outraged. They said it was too harsh, that the judge was using Diddy as a scapegoat, making him the face of punishment to prove a point. The debate was loud, messy, and unrelenting, but one thing nobody could deny was that the sentence marked the end of an era. For fans, it was heartbreaking. For critics, it was vindication. For the industry, it was a wake-up call, because if someone like Diddy, the mogul, the tycoon, the symbol of untouchable success, could be brought down this hard, then the myth of invincibility in the entertainment world was officially dead. Think about the symbolism of it. For years, Diddy's image was plastered across magazines, TV, billboards, the ultimate success story. He sold the dream that no matter what happened, he was always in control. He built an empire of luxury, influence, and dominance, and yet, here he was, standing in a courtroom as a judge stripped him of everything that mattered most: freedom, dignity, legacy. In that moment,
Submarinian will be clocking, because I mean, that's really what it is. Is he truly sorry? Is he truly remorseful for everything that he's done? I mean, he's now been convicted of a crime here, the transportation to engage in prostitution, which, to your point, Jesse, we haven't heard an apology for all of that. We've heard an apology for the domestic violence side of things. And I mean, I will just guess that Diddy might go on for a bit longer, as it is his first time really to address all of these accounts. But I want to know the emotion behind all of it.
It's a great point, and that's obviously something that Elizabeth Milner would know, because she's inside there. She can hear it for herself. But if we're clocking this, if we're clocking that he's not directly addressing the federal crimes that he was convicted of, you know Judge Subramanian's going to say it too. He says, I let down my community. I wanted to show we could take care of our own problems. I got lost. I'm not this bad person. I'm sorry to my community. I let you all down. People can change. I know I've changed. There is a part about this, Joe, and he goes, sometimes you have to go through life experiences. These are not excuses. I can't change the past, but I can change the future. I beg your honor for mercy to be a father again, to be a son again, a leader in my community again, to get the help I need. Now, Joe, look, we're criticizing parts of this from a legal point of view, from a human point of view. Could the judge be persuaded that this is a guy who's really learned his lesson, that could be a force of good, that he wasn't convicted of racketeering and sex trafficking, that while transportation to engage in prostitution is a serious crime, and there were elements of violence and drugs that were a part of it, and this happened many times, that perhaps he should not have to spend a significant portion of his life now in prison?
Here's what I say, at the risk of coming off like I'm banging on Diddy, and this is not a banging, Diddy day kind of thing for me. But if he's learned his lesson in 14 months, he'll learn it better in 2 or 3 years. And so what that means is there's got to be another reason over and above him learning his lesson. That's part of it. But over and above him learning his lesson, for him to be released more sooner than later. And that could be the force of good that he could be. I don't want to minimize that. I don't want to minimize the fact that he's, he's got ingenuity. He's creative. He has a huge platform. Everybody's going to be watching the things that he does next. And so that would have to be more the reason to let him get out earlier, because again, he knows how to succeed. And in all of these areas where he says, because of, he lost his father and it made him more likely to be a domestic abuser or whatever that was, he overcame the odds in so many other ways. So that doesn't fly either. So it's really gotta be his ability to do something maybe that almost nobody else could do coming from this situation. So I'm not gonna minimize the power of that and how the judge may evaluate that, but it's going to have to be that even more than just learning the lesson.
He just said, I don't want to let God down. I have no one to blame but myself. I know I will never put my hands on another person again. I'm willing to comply with any conditions. Me sharing my story is not a scheme to get less time. This story is tragic. If Your Honor gives me a chance to share my story, this has a positive impact. Thank you to the jury. Your Honor gave me
The empire didn't just crack, it crumbled. And you know what makes it even more powerful? The fact that the judge didn't hold back. There was no soft landing, no gentle wording, no special exceptions. The harsh sentence wasn't just punishment. It was a statement that Diddy's name no longer carried weight in that room. A statement that his story had reached its inevitable end. And the final chapter wasn't one of triumph but of downfall. His supporters broke down. Some shouted, some cried, some stormed out of the courtroom. His lawyers tried to keep composure, but the weight of what had just happened was written all over their faces. Even they, with all their years of experience, all their connections and strategies, couldn't protect him from this. And Diddy himself? Reports say he sat down, slumped, as if the life had been drained out of him. The swagger was gone. The mogul was gone. All that was left was a man facing the cold reality of years behind bars. The country felt the impact immediately. You could see it in the way people reacted online, in the way communities debated.
Confidence in the jury to believe that I did not have to testify. They sacrificed 8 weeks. I thank them. I thank them for not guilty. Serena, back to you. Your thoughts on this?
Well, here's the thing. Sean Diddy Combs always had a platform to tell his story. He didn't need to be convicted of heinous crimes to be able to inspire people and use his power for good. I feel it's such a shame that somebody who did come from such a difficult and broken background and was able to pursue his dreams and get there, then turned around and used it to manipulate people, to harm people, people who are very vulnerable to him. And he used his power for bad. Maybe he did some good things. Maybe his children love him. That's true. But there are many, many convicted felons with children who were innocent and are always going to be innocent, waiting for their fathers or mothers to come home. He's not unique in that situation. What made Sean Combs unique is that he grew out of a terrible situation, and instead of using that to better his community and better the people around him, he used them and ended up doing these heinous crimes towards the women in his life. So I don't know that it rings so favorably to a judge that he's now telling his story in this way.
Well, he might have been listening to us, because Sierra, you know what he just said? I take full responsibility for my Mann Act convictions. They want you to make an example of me. I want you to think about making an example of what a person can do if they get another chance. Consider the beautiful children who spoke for me. Again, I've heard, sometimes we have both heard statements from defendants when they're sentenced. Sometimes it really have no impact. Sometimes they're saying the jury got it wrong, I'm innocent. Sometimes their words kind of are hollow. By the way, Sean Combs just rapped. He says, no matter what anyone says, I am truly sorry. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm curious from your perspective, does this one stand out to you, Sierra? Is it different?
I think this does stand out. I mean, just minutes ago, we were saying, okay, we haven't heard about the Mann Act. We haven't heard about the transportation to engage in prostitution. And we said Judge Arun Subramanian would be clocking this. So it seems as though this may be a strategic move on the path of P. Diddy to mention this and to say right out of the gate, hey, I'm sorry to Cassie, Jane, etc., all the people that he hurt and how. Then he talked about his family, and then now he's talking about his conviction here. And I do have to wonder if perhaps he went through and, talked it through with his defense attorneys. Hey, here's what I'm thinking of saying. What do you think I should include? What do you think I should, exclude? All of those sort of things. I think it's interesting that he says this isn't any sort of scheme here in order for me to get less time. Make an example out of me in the way that I can go on and share my story. And this kind of goes to what Serena was saying. P. Diddy was already a public figure. He didn't have to be convicted of a crime like this in order to share his story. I mean, we've seen a lot of other celebrities who have gone through addiction or things like that who haven't been convicted and then show us a positive change as a role model. So I think it's interesting, but I do think it's strategic. He brought up the Mann Act.
Okay, Serena, what did you say to me before? You go, if he might change his opinion, he might take a break. Mm-hmm. Judge says, let's take 5 minutes. 5 minutes. All right. What does that mean? What does that mean?
How much case law can...
Is he changing his sentence?
Oh, man, 5 minutes is that perfect amount of time to show that you're taking it seriously, but not yet quite enough time to really change the words that you were planning on saying. I don't think that he's going to change what he intended to say when he first started today's session.
In the way fans processed the news, this wasn't just another celebrity scandal. This was something bigger, a cultural earthquake, because Diddy wasn't just a person, he was a symbol of power, of wealth, of success, of untouchability. And now, that symbol had been destroyed in front of everyone. It's almost poetic. In a tragic way, the man who once told the world he couldn't stop, wouldn't stop, finally had no choice but to stop. The man who lived like he was always one step ahead finally found himself cornered with nowhere to go. The man who made himself larger than life was brought down to size by the simple, unflinching words of a judge. And whether you think this was justice or vengeance, one thing is undeniable, this moment will be remembered. the day Diddy's fate was sealed, the day the gavel came down, the day the shockwaves spread across the country, is now part of history. It's the day an empire ended not with a bang, not with a celebration, but with a harsh sentence that left everyone stunned. From here on out, everything is different. Diddy is no longer the mogul who ruled the culture. He is now the man who lost it all in a courtroom. His name, his brand, his legacy, forever tied to this moment. And that's the cruel irony of it all, because in the end, it wasn't the music, it wasn't the success, it wasn't the wealth that defined him. It was this downfall, this sentence, this brutal end to a story that once seemed unstoppable. This wasn't just about punishing Diddy, this was about sending a message. The judge made it clear that his wealth, his fame, his influence didn't give him immunity. In fact, it was almost the opposite. The fall of someone so powerful had to be met with consequences just as powerful. And in that moment, the country felt the ripple. The headlines exploded, social media lit up, and everyone realized they were watching history. The shockwaves aren't going to fade anytime soon. People will be talking about this for years, dissecting it, debating it, using it as an example of how power can crumble. And for Diddy, there's no coming back. The fate is sealed, the door has closed, and the legacy he once fought so hard to build is now overshadowed by the harsh reality of a prison sentence that shocked the entire country. This was the day the illusion ended, the day the untouchable fell, the day Diddy's freedom was ripped away in front of the world. And no matter what happens next, no matter how long he serves or what he says from behind bars, this moment will forever define him. This was the final act, this was the downfall, and the echo of that judge's words will haunt Diddy for the rest of his life.